Hi everyone. A very good evening and morning, afternoon to all the creators here. I'm so ecstatic to see all of you today. So I think let's start with it. Why should we wait any other minute? Let me introduce myself. I'm Rashika, the CMO at ProApp. I'm also one of the brain behind building all the courses. And for the very first workshop today, designing better portfolios, let me introduce you to the speaker today. His name is Mr. Sandesh Subedi. He is one of the co-founder at ProApp and also to a leading digital design agency, Procreator. He has a decade of experience working in the design industry. I've personally worked with Sandesh for almost 5 years now, and he has helped a lot of designers grow in their career. So we thought, since it's our first workshop, why not start with him? And who else will know about building better portfolios? Let's welcome Sandesh.
It's nice to be talking to all of you over here today, and thank you for everyone who's chose to attend this, webinar today here with us. Rashika, thank you for the introduction. Like Rashika said, today we'll be talking about designing better portfolios. As designers, I think portfolio is the stepping stone towards either kickstarting your career or venturing out to a new stage in your career trajectory. And portfolio is that guiding step. It becomes very essential for us to understand what are some of the things that we need to ensure to design a better portfolio. And today we'll be precisely touching upon that. Let me share my screen right away, and we'll go to the deck and we'll start with it. Okay. A little bit more about me. I'm an engineer turned designer. So I was in engineering background, and I found my affinity towards design. And ever since that, I've never looked back. I'm also a certified usability analyst. I've been working with a variety of clients from startups to enterprises alike in Procreator, a digital design agency where UX UI is the core of our services. And I'm also one of the fellow co-founders here at ProApp, the very own app from which you guys have come today and registered for this workshop. And thank you for showing interest in ProApp and loving it. We are very excited to announce a lot of things that we have in store at ProApp as well. Let's look at, what's the outline for today's workshop. Yeah. Today, we'll be talking about introduction and background of portfolio. So what even is a portfolio is something that we'll understand better. We'll also look at, how do we go about showcasing work in a portfolio, right? What are some of the things that we need to take care of and ensure that our work looks good? And most importantly, we'll also be looking at, common portfolio design mistakes. What are some of the things that, young designers, when they are venturing out into design, end up making mistake when it comes to portfolio design? Yeah. We'll also be looking into the employer's perspective on things. How do employees, scan your portfolio, and how should we be mindful about those aspects? Then finally, when all of this is done, when our portfolio is looking all great with all the tips and techniques that we've learned, how do we go ahead and publish it, right? Do we choose a website? Do we choose Behance? Do we choose Dribbble? What do we choose, right? We'll also be touching upon that. And finally, we'll be closing it with a Q&A. So that brings me to a very important point, which is, as we go through the deck, you might have some queries, you might have some questions. You please put them on Q&A, and our host will moderate those questions, and we'll take up a few as time permits us towards the end. Okay. We'll be spending a lot of time on point number 2, which is showcasing work in a portfolio. And that's going to be the meat of today's session. All right, let's get inside. So there is this famous quotation by Brian Reid that says everything is designed and few things are designed well. I couldn't agree more. And this is the heart of today's presentation as well. When we are young in our career, or even when we are thinking of making a transition, whether from engineering to design or from any other background to design, we end up making a portfolio. We design it, but then it's not really designed well. And today we are going to touch upon exactly how to design it well, because there is no such thing as no design. Either it's a well-designed thing or a not well-designed thing. And today, that's exactly what we are going to be talking about when it comes to portfolio side of things. Okay. So let's first understand what even is a portfolio, right? Some of us who are present over here on today's session might be designers who are already working and are professional designers and may have a good idea of what a portfolio is, but it does not hurt to refresh on the concept of what is a portfolio, right? When we look at anatomy of portfolio, there are three things that we should always ensure to have in our portfolio. One is the work, because it's for the work that someone is going to come to your portfolio, whether it's a potential client or an employer. They will be coming to your portfolio to primarily see your work. And when your work have done enough talking, they would want to understand more about you. So the about you aspect could also be called as resume. And then finally, now that the work have interested and you seem interesting as a person, they might want to contact you. So always ensure that these three key ingredients are present in your portfolio. Yeah. Now, when you talk about places like Behance or Dribble or any other publishing platforms, they already have contact and resume sorted to some degree, wherein they have an about section where you can put your information about who you are, what is it that you're looking for, what is your expertise, and they also generally have a button to contact or email of some sort. But when it comes to building your own portfolio in a website, a custom website, using any methods, either you're coding it on your own or whether you are using some libraries that exist out there, these three key elements must be always there. There may be more things that goes on somebody's portfolio, but these three are the things that should fundamentally be present. Okay, so let's look at each of these aspects in a little bit more detail. Okay, so number one is, why would someone come, right? They would come to see your work, and then only they would be interested to understand further about you. So a couple of things that we need to be mindful about is, number one is to make it very easy to access, right? So if you have your own website, you need to ensure that there is probably a work link on the top of your navigation, or you showcase some of the best works as a carousel in the homepage itself, or the moment you scroll down, there needs to be a gallery of work that someone can click on and enter inside to understand more, right? So therefore, make it very easy to access your work, because that's for the main reason someone is coming to your portfolio. Yeah. The other thing, this popular concept known as no filler, all killer. So what do we mean by this? When we start, in our career, there is a temptation to put everything that we know out there, right? So we might have done a lot of college projects, a lot of self-practice work, and we sometimes get so focused on quantity that I've done this, I've done that. We forget that quality is what actually trumps over quantity. So you should resist the urge to put everything. Okay, include only best works that you have. So therefore, only put killer works. Do not put your filler works. The third point that we need to be very mindful of is matching and mirroring. So what is matching and mirroring? You might be looking out for a certain company. You may have a certain company that you want to work for, or you may want to look for certain kind of clients. So in such a case, understand what kind of work those people already do. What kind of work that, let's say, for example, a design agency that you're trying to go to already does, and try to have similar kind of work in your portfolio. Why? Because when they come to your portfolio and look at your work, they could easily resonate with. They'll be like, oh yeah, this guy looks like or this girl looks like someone I can work with, because the kind of work that they have resonates with what we do, and that becomes a brownie point for you. So if you are profiling potential employers, make sure that portfolio resonates the kind of work that they do. The other bit that we need to be looking at when we are putting our work out there in our portfolio is ordering, highlighting, and categorizing. Very, very important, right? These are small, fundamentals that oftentimes get missed out, which is, if you have some flagship project, right? Now, flagship could be defined in any way. Maybe it's a complex project with a lot of sprints that you've worked on, and you want to showcase that you're capable enough of handling, a complex work. Or maybe it's a very unique platform that you've worked at, or simply because you've done a really good job, the designs that you made, whether it's illustrations or logo or UI design, whatever it is, you've done a really good job at it, and you want people to be looking at that first, right? So always, try to highlight them in some way. Now, it could be through a different color, it could be by putting star marks, or it could be by putting it on the top, and having other things down below, or by making it big and having other things probably small. However that is, right? Make sure you highlight them. and order them such that they are towards the top. Yeah. And categorization, very, very important. When we are starting out, oftentimes we are not specialist in what do we do, right? We are generalists. Maybe we do a little bit of UI, maybe we do a little bit of logo design, maybe we do a little bit of graphic design. So in such a case, categorizing the work becomes very important, so that someone, when they are looking at your portfolio, already know what they are going to get into, right? So they don't have to open it and then realize that, oh, I don't want to look at the branding work. Actually, I was supposed to look at UI work because that's the position I'm hiring for, or that's the position for which I'm having a designer. Yeah. So that's very, very important. Then there's this another highly debated topic in the design world, which is, should I generalize or should I specialize? So the answer is a bit tricky. There is no right answer to it. Yeah, it's often always a good idea to specialize, but also we should be mindful that if your target right now are small or mid-sized companies, then they might want to see some variety, right? What happens oftentimes in a smaller mid-sized companies is that they may not have enough budget to be hiring specialists in each domains. So they may always find it suitable to hire someone who have another complementary skill also, right? Maybe I know UI design and illustration also to some degree, so it could be a brownie point for you. But on the contrary, if you're looking at big companies, they would often always want to hire specialists because they want to hire people who are specialized in a particular niche. So be mindful of that and decide what would work best for you. Okay, now let's talk about resume, right? So when I say resume, I mean the about section, whether it's a section on your website or it's a full-blown page or it's a about section snippet in Behance or Dribble. Try to make it more engaging. Yeah. And especially when you talk about websites, I've seen that a lot of young designers, when we are building our resume for the very first time in a website, we literally try to go by the resume aspect of it and try to have a chronological list of events, a line and a circle, a timeline view, and it just looks like a traditional resume, and sometimes that's very boring, right? As designers, I think we are creative enough to come with concepts that are away from that list of chronological events. So ensure that your bio or your description is short and crisp, right? Focus majorly on core strengths. What are your areas of expertise? What are the skills that you have, right? Also, it's important to talk about why would people might want to hire you. So, I may be a specialist in designing SaaS platforms. So, talk about that, so that if there is anybody who is looking at your portfolio from SaaS platforms point of view, they might want to go ahead and hire you. Also, it's a good idea to clarify, what is the kind of opportunities that you're looking at. So they say, what you ask is what you get. So why shy away from telling what is it that you're looking for? You may be looking out for, software companies, who have software products. You may be looking out for branding projects. So mention that in your resume section. I'm a so and so designer on the hunt for creative projects on branding. I'm so and so designer, I'm looking for creative projects on UI design, etc. And when we talk about creatively showing about you in your resume, it need not be zazzed up with a lot of complex elements and characters, etc., etc. It could be as simple as what is shown over here in the screen also. So here in this, this gentleman, Jason D'Souza, he simply said, hey, I'm Jason, and he's talked about who is he. There is a little bit of description around what is he looking for, what does he do, and there are some of the skills that he have mentioned and some facts to prove that he's a credible fellow, and that's about it. It's not a very long, boring PDF, that's hard to scan. But at the same time, he's given a download button over here for someone to go ahead and download the resume in case they want to take a PDF copy also. Yeah. Then we look at the third aspect, which is, okay, great, I've seen the work, I've known about this person, seems interesting, let me try to get in touch with this person. Yeah. In such a case, you have to make your contact page or a contact section very clearly navigable, right? People should be able to navigate to that place very, very easily, whether by putting a consistent contact floating button towards the bottom of your site or having a contact us link present on the top, however that is, right? Or right after your case study is over, at the end probably giving a button that says contact me. However that is, you have to make it very clear for people to navigate to contact page. Oftentimes this gets missed out when we're very young. Then The other thing is give multiple options to contact, right? General tendency of people is to provide email and social media. Some also provide phone number, but then that's a personal choice. Some of us may be like, okay, privacy concerns, I don't want to show it, that's totally fine. And some of us even take it to a next level, which is probably having a contact form and don't necessarily display your email address right away. The other thing is, if you're showing your email address, ensure that it's proper and professional email address, right? It goes a long way. Having a professional email address goes a long way in communicating that you are a professional person. It's very saddening to see a good work, a nice bio, and then finally landing in your contact page to only see something like John underscore hearthacker 69 or something like that, right? You might rather have an email address that says something like John underscore designer, John underscore design, John underscore illustrator, or something like that. Keep it professional, because the last thing an employer wants to see is a tacky or a cheesy email address. We need to understand what are the different types of work that exists out there, right? And I do not necessarily mean the type of work in the sense of whether it's branding or graphic design or UI or UX. I'm more interested in the holistic categorization of the work, right? And those could be broken down into 4 things. Now, why do we need to understand the type of work? Because work showcase is the main objective of our portfolios, right? And determining what kind of work we have and what do we want to show becomes the first and most important step. So let's look at some of the types of work. Number 1 is a concept work. So concept work is something that necessarily does not exist yet. Who is this beneficial for? Is this beneficial for beginners who are venturing out into the design and do not have any prior work experience? They do not have a brief or a problem statement to be working on. They have learned design and they want to now be able to make a portfolio so that they can reach out to potential employers, right? But what do they work on? So in this case, you guys could be working on something called as concept works. You define your own problem statement, like maybe making a time travel app, or making a logo design for a company that's based out of Mars, let's say. You can go crazy. It could be anything that you feel is related to your work, right? So concept works does not require any defined problem statement, but the problem statement is something that you yourself define. Yeah. And what is the creative need for something like that? And you create it from scratch. Defining what is the problem statement, why are you trying to make that concept work, and clarifying the need for such a work becomes very important. You cannot simply create a concept for the sake of it. Having some thought process on why you've created that concept goes a long way in proving your rationale and thought process as a designer. The other type of work is school projects, pretty self-explanatory, right? So you must have received a lot of assignments if you are in a design college. So this is applicable for folks who are already in design school and are learning design. So you would have received a lot of assignments and graduation project maybe, and that could be also a part of your portfolio, right? In this case, you are working within the constraints that has been given by your college or your professor, right? So there usually is a brief, there usually is a problem statement that you need to be solving, or maybe this is a problem statement that the college have said you can choose on your own as well, right? So it's okay to put school projects on portfolio and mentioning clearly what the brief was given to you, right? If a brief was given to you, or if a brief has been created by you, what was that brief, right? And also indicating that it was a school assignment, it was a school project, becomes very, very important. And most importantly, this is something that I have personally seen, right? We've interviewed a lot of people wherein, people would come and when we look at their Behance, it looks like, okay, great. This looks like a lot of work that this person has done. And then when we eventually go on to interview them, we realize that it's a shared work, but there has been no mention of other people that were involved in the project. So it's always credible to also reference other people who've worked on the project, right? You may have generally, when we look at school projects, there is always a team that's there, and there are a couple of people working on an assignment. So it's good to also credit those folks and clearly mentioning what was your role on the project, right? Then the third type of work is client projects. So these are work that you would have done for a client. Now, client does not necessarily mean, it should be a paid work. It could be a free work also that you could have done just to practice, because, when you're starting out, you may not necessarily get someone who is willing to pay you right from the get-go. So you might be working for someone for free, maybe a relative, maybe someone in your neighborhood. It does not matter, right? What matters is that it was a client at the end of the day that you've worked for, and there generally is a well-defined brief or a problem statement that you would be solving on, and mentioning who the client is, what industry it is, what was the business challenge that was being faced by the particular client, and how did you solve those challenges, what was the proposal that you made, and how did you arrive at the solution, becomes very important to showcase in your portfolio. This helps potential employers understand your thought process behind how do you navigate around a challenge and come up with solutions. Then the fourth kind of work is redesigns, right? Redesigns are very interesting. Why it is very interesting? It's also challenging at the same time, because there's something that already exists out there, right? Maybe it's an app that is used for, in your local neighborhood. Maybe there is a app that you use to book train tickets, right? And that does not look good, or that does not have a good user experience. Or maybe it's a logo that exists out there for a certain company, but that's not up to the standard. Maybe it's too dated. There could be any problem that you might have found in an existing solution, and you decide to, say, what, let me go ahead and redesign this. So those are redesigns, yeah. What needs to be, clearly communicated in a redesign project is your rationale behind why even redesign that thing in the first place, right? If it's already existing out there, why did you choose to go ahead and redesign? What was your thought process behind redesigning becomes very important. Great. So those are the four types of work in a nutshell. Now, what's the takeaway? You should choose the kind of work to showcase based on the level you are at, right? If you are a beginner, you might be resorting to, concept work, or you might be resorting to, school assignments. If you are a designer at a, design school, if you've done some work, you're at the nascent stage of your career, maybe, it's been a couple of months that you are into, a design industry, and you've worked already, whether paid or free, for someone, then you have client projects, right? Or maybe, no matter what stage of your career you are at, you chose to redesign something, and that could be a redesign project. So go ahead, understand the kind of work that you want to showcase based on your level, and choose the most promising projects. 3 to 5 should be just good enough. Great. So the first part was understanding the type of work when it comes to showcasing work in your portfolio. Now let's also look at, how do you go ahead and craft a storyline, right? Now, an individual work is often also called as case study, right? So you have a lot of work in your portfolio. It's a collection of different works, and one particular work is also frequently referred as case study. So how do you craft a, good storyline in a case study? I'll be taking an example of, a UX UI design project in this case to show you how you can, craft a storyline, and that storyline could be very well adapted to other, verticals of design as well, whether it's illustration or whether it's branding or animation. You could, totally go ahead and, adapt the storyline and work, in this format as well. So why storyline is important? Because it is what lets the viewer understand and keep them engaged, right? So communicating around, everything that you've done is what storyline is, and that is what is very, very important for someone to understand what is it that you've done and keep them engaged throughout the process of viewing your work. Now let's get into the different sections that's required, in a storyline. So here I'm taking example of ProApp itself. So I'm putting myself in a position wherein I am the designer of ProApp. I'm considering that, I was the designer who designed ProApp, let's say, for example's sake. And then I'm showing you how we could go about when it comes to, defining a storyline. And at the end of this, I'll show you the entire case study of how this would turn out. Great, let's start. First thing is headline, right? So headline or cover or banner image, however you like to call it, is the most important thing and the first thing that should be there in your case study. Why? Because this section explains the project at a very high level, and the objective of having a headline is to seek for attention and evoke some sort of curiosity on people when they are looking at your work, right? It should be interesting enough so that they want to scroll down further and see the rest of the sections, right? It's always a good idea to glorify the work that you've done, right? Whether through uses of mockups or brilliantly showing them in some 3D form or some other form, making it look stand out, and having a copy, right, a text that glorifies your work becomes very important. So in this case, someone could have simply chosen to write UX UI design for an edutech app, but what becomes more interesting is something like digital design college learning app for designers by designers. Suddenly the copy seems interesting, the text seems lucrative enough for me to scroll down more. Hey, what is this app for designers by designers? Let me understand more, right? So a sign of a good portfolio is also learning to write good text. So practice writing and practice reading also, so that you can look for best words, better words, alternate words, enrich your vocabulary so that you can write crafty sentences for people to be able to interested in what you have to say. The second most important thing is the project brief. I've seen a lot of portfolios come my way wherein there's just images after images of what you've done, right? There's an image 1 and then there's image 2 and image 3 and just image after image. There's no clear mention of who the client is, what was the industry, what services did you provide, who the company is on its own, right? So understanding that from a potential employer's point of view or a potential client's point of view becomes very important, because they are scouting for what is this person capable of, what is the work that this person have worked on. So always have a project brief, and there are a few things that you might want to consider, which is talking about who the client is, what industry they are from, what is the services that are provided, and a brief description of what the project is or what the company is all about. Yeah. And you can see in this case, again, I'm taking the example of ProApp itself. I'm talking about how the client was ProApp, the industries education, technology, the services provided was UX and UI, and at the same time talking a little bit about what is ProApp, what does it seek to do. Great. So now that we've looked at headline and cover and project brief, the third thing to include in your portfolio is problem or challenge or objective, however you call it. The intent is to talk about what is the objective that you're trying to solve, what was the challenge that was given in front of you, what is the issue that the business was facing, right? And you need not write an entire essay about it. And towards the later part of this presentation, I'll show some examples where people have gone to write long descriptions of the challenges and solutions. That's not really required. Usually less than 200 words is just about enough, right? 100 to 150 words to a couple of paragraphs is just about enough. In this case, I'm talking about how the challenge, the objective was to create an engaging platform that could make learning on the go easy, simplified, and fun, right? So always ensure, whether it's your college project or whether it's a redesign or whatever it is, what was the challenge at hand, what was the problem at hand, right? Talk about that. Then comes the solution. Okay, great, I've talked about the challenge. Now I also need to talk about how have I solved that, what was my approach, what was my thought process behind solving that challenge, and how did I do it, right? So how did you arrive at the finalized solution, or what was the thought process behind that solution needs to be communicated. So in this case, we talked about, in the case of ProApp as an example, we talked about some time before that the challenge was to create fun, engaging, and a modern app for fellow designers. So what could be the solution? The solution is making an app which looks creative by having illustration centric approach, combining a lot of thoughtful illustrations and icons, and coupling them with subtle hues of different primary colors of red, green, yellow, and blue. They come really well together to create a creative mood for learning. So that was my approach behind solving ProApp, if I were to be the designer who worked on it and I'm putting it in a portfolio. Great. Now that we've talked about challenge and approach or the solution, we should go ahead and talk about the process, right? What is the process? Now there is this question that comes, generally processes are very similar, right? Let's say, for example, when we talk about design projects, there is a set process. Okay, you do you do wireframing, you do visual design, you do prototyping. If you talk about, let's say, logo design project, you do mood boards, you do concept sketches, and you do high fidelity designs, and then you put them into mockups and help people understand and visualize the final surfaces that the logo is going to be put in. So isn't it boring that we talk about the same process again and again, because everyone generally follows that process? Not really. Why? Because although the framework of solving something remains similar, you could have your own quirks, your own nuances, your own methodology in certain steps of that project that you might have done, right? So for example, for a branding project or a logo design project, you might have also done stakeholder interviews, right? You might have talked to the main stakeholders of the company to understand their vision and brand better. Go ahead and include that as part of your process, right? Talk about that. So understanding that although the guiding process remains same for a different verticals of work, it's okay to go ahead and talk about certain own quirks and nuances that you would have done within those stages or those process. Yeah. So here you talk about how you creatively solve the problem. You write about your creative process. Again, taking example of ProApp, I've talked about here how there were two stages of design, UX design. Here I talk about how there were different personas, how we came up with a solution to fit those personas, and then the second stage was UI design, and we talk about the UI design aspect over there. Yeah, so process, communicating your process, very, very important. Yeah, most interesting part for which we've done this hard job of creating our portfolio is the outcome itself, right? What's the end result now, right? What have we done? So this is the actual fun part where we creatively showcase our designs, right? Aid with some text and not just visuals after visuals. When we are beginning in our career, there is a tendency to actually show our work, right away. I've done so much, 20 screens, 30 screens, 50 screens, let me cram all of them up. Not really a good idea. You might want to select only a few screens, right, and highlight them, and the rest of the screens could be shown in some other way, right? Maybe as a collage, and also aid it with some text and visuals, right? Not just visuals, not just text and text, but also do a right balance of text and visuals. At the same time, what becomes important is using appropriate mockups or visualizations. Are you doing a branding project? Then hey, showcase some aspects of how that branding or logo is going to translate into let's say a visiting card or a cup or a t-shirt or a cap. If you're doing a UI design project, try to show it in a phone, if it's a phone app, right? If you're doing an illustration, try to show it in context of where that illustration is going to be at the end applied. Is it going to be a wall decal? Is it going to be an artwork in a restaurant? Try to show that in context. That's always a very good idea. It helps people visualize things better in its true form that it's going to be eventually placed at. Yeah. Then finally, the last section that needs to be there in your portfolio is impact, right? Did your work create some impact? Now, this is a very tricky thing because not always we may have an impact section, right? And it's okay to not have an impact section if your project or the work that you've done hasn't created any impact just yet. That's totally fine. But impact could be as abstract as things like a testimonial that someone has given, right? Your client must have given some testimonial. Maybe you've done an app design and then it went on to some sort of app store or play store and people are giving positive reviews and ratings. Or maybe it's just a college assignment that you've submitted and you've received good grades for it. Go ahead and show that, right? That's also an impact that you've created. That's also an achievement that has happened out of that project, right? It could be more downloads that something has received as a result of the exercise that you've done. It could be increased footfall to a particular store, let's say, because you've done a graphic design for that store. Anything that's measurable or abstract in the form of reviews or testimonials is totally fine to go ahead and be included in your portfolio. Overall, if you include impact, it is going to create good impact. Great. Now let's look at give me a second. let's look at how did all of these sections were combined to form a nice looking a simple nice looking case study. So we talked about headline, how there is a headline or a cover section. Using these mockups, there is some curiosity and interest that has been aimed for. And then we go ahead and have this brief section, project brief, who the client is, what the industry is. Again, challenge and solution. Then for section break, not to make it too monotonous, there are some visuals in between. And then a few more texts and other aspects of the design, like the type and colors that has been talked about over here. The process, what was the process that was followed, UX design, UI design. So in this particular case, you see that there are accordions, considering that the end output of this is going to be on a website, and people might want to open and close different things and not want to read everything. But if you're doing it in Behance, if you're trying to put this in Behance, you might very well get rid of the accordions and already show that these sections are expanded, because in Behance you can always export the certain frames and put them one below the other to create a long case study. Then certain nice copy in between that talks about how there was thoughtfully crafted course illustrations, because the solution, if you remember, we talked about how this app was made illustration centric to make it fun and engaging. Every element crafted with love and showing some screens, adding a little bit of not very long copy, but just subtle enough to explain that particular screen or the particular thought process. Again, some section breaks, because too much symmetry is also sometimes boring. So you can break the symmetry by having something like this, a collection of screens. It also showcases that there were a lot of screens that you've worked on, and it's not just one or two. And again, a few more screens and a section break. And finally, the impact section, right? What the impact has been created. Now, if it were to be in a website, you might want to follow it up with, a contact section or any other call to action that you feel is important. Maybe you want people to contact, maybe you want people to visit your social media, or maybe you want people to go to a next project and see the next project that you have to showcase. Okay. So yeah, that is all about, the storyline in a portfolio. Now, the third aspect of showcasing work in your portfolio is making your work stand out. And I hope at this point of time I'm going at the right speed. I hope you all are being able to catch up. If you feel the need to slow down, do drop that a message, and I'd be able to probably go a little bit slow, but I hope I'm going just about fine, and everyone is able to take notes or take care of important things that you wish to highlight or keep notes of. Great. So how to make your work stand out? Let's talk about that. Why to even make the work stand out, right? Because visuals are as important as getting the story right. We might have a nice story, we might have a nice written copy, but if we do not have engaging or enticing visuals, then it's a bummer, right? We want to have our visuals right. We want our visuals to look nice and attractive so that the storyline or the text that we've crafted could be complemented well with. So how do you go ahead and create nice visuals? First thing, mockups, very important. And at the same time, mockups are tricky because especially when we are young, we have the tendency to overdo it, right? Mockups after mockups after mockups also end up looking boring. So try to understand what is the work that you're doing. Okay, you're doing a packaging, you're doing a packaging design. You might want to showcase that in the context. You're doing a branding project. You might want to show, certain aspects of where they are going to be applied. You're doing a UI design project. Go ahead and show it in, the actual form that's going to be used at. Why use mockups? Number one, because it helps with better visualization and it helps establish the context better of how the end form of the work is going to be. They make designs look more professional, but let's be mindful that we'll not overdo mockups, right? Sometimes just using frames with shadows is also enough. You might have seen sometime before that in the case of the ProApp case study that I showed sometime before, there weren't a lot of mockups used. They were just, rectangular frames that look like a cell phone and just had shadows. That's also good enough, right? Especially when you talk about UI or UX projects. So it's not always necessary to have phones, but in case of other project types like packaging or branding, go ahead and show them in the actual form that they end up being used at. The other thing is, we found one mock-up, we really like it, and then we use it over and over again across, all of our works and all of our, case studies that we have. Let's not do that. Yeah, it becomes very boring because, a potential employer or a client may have seen one of your work, and now they're going to another work. They're going to see the same kind of mock-up. They don't see any, dynamic thing that's happening, right? It feels very boring. So don't use the same mock-up over and over again. Yeah. And at the same time, do not use mockups that actually take attention away from the work, right? And I will show you what that means after some time, where I have an example of some common mistakes that we do, and one of them is using too much glorified mockups, in which case your attention goes to the mockup rather than the work itself. So yeah, mockups are one way to spice up your presentation or visual aspect. The other thing is fancy layouts. So what do I mean by fancy layouts, right? So when someone is looking at your portfolio, right, if you have a lot of symmetry and a lot of alignment, all the edges are perfectly squared off and balanced and everything is totally symmetrical, it also sometimes get a little monotonous. So break away from that aspect of the urge to align everything. Sometimes a little bit of asymmetry creates a right harmony. So fancy layouts, like you see over here, screens aligned in a floating form, or if you're showing illustrations and using asymmetrical grids, or if you're showing a logo design project and showing a bunch of visiting cards which look levitating, all of this spice up and adds to the aesthetic appeal of what is it that you're showcasing. So use this as section breaks, right? You might have a lot of symmetrical sections, and then put this as a section break, move on to the next section. Yeah, it makes the entire case study feel a little bit more dynamic. The third thing that you could do to spice up your work in your portfolio in a particular case study is animations, right? So thoughtfully created animations, like whether it's an animation in a UI design, or an animation of an illustration, or maybe if you're doing a branding project, showcasing that probably a visiting card is flying off and coming, something like that, right? A little bit of motion goes a long way. So you could animate a UI screen, animate a logo, illustration, whatever it is. And it's okay if you're creating that animation just for the sake of your case study. Maybe you didn't do the animation as part of the scope of work. It's okay. It's not cheating. You can go ahead and take it up a notch. It lays a good impression in front of someone who's looking at your work. It shows the potential of the work, right? It does not matter if the client paid you for that work or not, or maybe that was not part of scope. Maybe your college assignment was also not requiring any of animations. So, but if you want to go ahead and do it, you could always go ahead and add it. It's not being fake. Yeah. Not all projects may have animation, so take it with a pinch of salt. And also animating may not be everyone's cup of tea. So you could take help of a friend if you want to, or maybe learn some quick tools and just do a little bit of animation, just to add a little bit of creative flair. All right. Cool. So we've looked at three things so far. One is, in showcasing your portfolio, we've looked at three things. One is, the storyline. The other one is type of work. And the third thing is what we just looked at is, how to spice up your, presentation. Now, the fourth thing that we're looking at is some helpful resources for work showcase. Yeah. And I'll be navigating through these slides a little quicker. Because there isn't a lot to discuss over here. It's more like, some examples of places from where you could get these resources. Yeah. So not everything needs to be made from scratch. You don't have to make the mockups. You don't have to go ahead and make an iPhone screen. You don't have to go ahead and make a, floating visiting card on your own. There are a lot of things that already exist in the internet, paid as well as free things. So you could always use that and, speed up your design process. Yeah. These resources will help bring your work up a notch. So there's, for device mockups, there's an app called Rotato. It's an app that exists out there. It has 3D mockups of various devices, and these are animated mockups that you could use to, replace with your screens. It may take a little bit of learning curve to download the app. It's also paid, so maybe not all of us would have the liberty to get it, but it's a very interesting app that you could always use. There is something called as angle mockups also, where you get a lot of device mockups that you could easily use in Figma or Sketch with just a shortcut. By selecting your artboard and just by using a shortcut, you could put your designs into a mockup very, very easily. There are other places also, like mockup phone, and also there's a blog post by Envision where they have a nice clay mockups, very minimal mockups that you could use and spice up your design. For branding mockups, if you're looking at Unblast and mockupsdesign.com, very good places. They have a plethora of very well designed, high quality mockups that you could use. They have a variety of mockups to choose from depending on the kind of work that you have. Another thing that you could use is gradients. Gradients are also on the rise. They are becoming very trendy these days. So you could use Gradient Hunt, Web Gradients, and there are a lot of other tools that you may already be using also. These are two of the places that I personally like. You could go ahead and refer them, find a nice gradient that complements the kind of project that you've done, use them. 3D characters, very, very popular these days. Again, you would see a lot of people using 3D characters in their portfolio, in their work, to creatively showcase some aspect. So there's these two websites, Shapefaced and Icons 8, where you could go ahead and search for 3D illustrations. You'd get a lot of these things for free as well. Then icons, in some places of your case study, you might want to showcase icons, or for that matter, for your design project also, you might want to get icons. You could refer to these websites. Noun Project, very, very good. Icon Scout, another good place to get icons. Use this, spice up your work a little bit. You might also be looking for patterns to creatively, put it in the corner of your design, or in, background of your portfolio, background of your header section, whatever that is. You could refer to these two places, Vectizy and patterns. Yeah. Great. Now that we've looked at all the aspects of showcasing a portfolio, showcasing work in a portfolio better, which is understanding the type of work, coming up with a storyline, spicing up your work, and a couple of resources to help spice up your work. Now let's move on to the third agenda for today, is to understand what are some common mistakes that us young designers end up doing when it comes to portfolio design. And let's look at them. Cool. The first and the big mistake I was talking about sometime before is having too much text, right? Or just too much images. If there's a lot of text, or if there's just a lot of images, it becomes a little boring, right? So you already lose interest to actually go ahead and scan this. Maybe you've written a very good copy. Maybe what you've written over here is very good, but then because there is a lot of text, it may end up becoming verbose as well. So there should be a right balance between text and images, right? Don't have a lot of lengthy elaborative text. Keep it minimal, keep it crisp, aid it with some supporting visuals wherever you can. The other mistake is too tight design, right? If you're showcasing mockups, or even if you're showcasing the design itself, or the actual design inside of your portfolio, make sure there are appropriate margin and spacings, because otherwise the designs will end up looking cluttered. And you need not show a lot of screens, right? You might want to show a lot of screens, and the only way you could do that is by cramming things up. Don't do that. It's okay to only showcase 4, 5, 6 screens, but space them out. And a good rule of thumb that I personally use is, whatever space I feel is good, I always end up multiplying it by 1.5 or 2, and it's okay to have a little bit more space than having a tightly crammed layout. It just makes the design or the portfolio itself look a little bit more airy, a little bit more comfortable to look at and scan. The third thing is, not describing who you are and what is your expertise, right? I've taken, some example from Behance, right? Where there isn't enough description about who you are, what is it that you do, right? And supporting links, or supporting, places where someone can go and understand more about you. So describing who you are becomes very, very important, right? And if you're building your own website, also providing a clear call to action, right, along with describing who you are becomes important. Maybe you want people to contact you, maybe you want people to, go ahead and check your social media, whatever that is, right? Have a clear call to action. Yeah. Some of the platforms like Behance and Dribble already, take care of these things, like, hire me, follow, etc., and give some call to actions already. So no matter whatever it is, whether it's your own website or whether it's Behance or Dribble, always, talk about who you are, right? Talk about some of the experiences that you have, and that becomes very important to have. The other thing is, incomplete or missing project overview. I was talking sometime before on how, having a project overview is very, very important, because as a potential client or as a potential employer, I'm trying to understand, right, what is it that you've done, who the client was, right, what is the kind of work that you've done. So having a brief, about that becomes very, very important, right? So a couple of things to not forget again is, give a clear project overview, talk about who the client is, what the project is, and put it in a very consumable format for someone to quickly look at. Yeah. This applies not just to, design, UX UI design project, but also for any other project, like whether it's, branding or animation, etc. You will always end up having a client. It would be a certain industry that you would be working at. So, mention that. And if it's a college work, go ahead and feel free to write, that it's a college work, and, the kind of work that you are doing is, maybe graphic design or branding or whatever that is. So give a clear project overview always. The other thing is, no information of others involved in the project. Like I talked about some time before, always mention other people if they have also been part of, that project, and describe what did you do, right? Maybe you as a team were involved with a bunch of other people, and you only worked on, let's say, UX design of a, UI UX design project. You probably only worked on the research aspect of it. So communicate that you only worked on the research aspect of it, even though the portfolio, talks about all the, outcomes that has happened. Mention what is it that you did and who were other people involved. It goes on to show that you are a team player and you value, others' effort, equally well, and not just brag only about yourself and make paint a false picture that you've done everything yourself. The other thing is, not having a well-designed cover section or a headline section or a banner section. So try to make it interesting, try to, evoke some interest in people, use a little bit of copy, a little bit of, mockups, or a little bit of screens, or a little bit of background, whatever that is that suits your work best, use that and keep it very minimal and clean, and focus on, making it exciting enough for people to go down and learn more about what is the work. Yeah. The other thing, this is my personal favorite, which is, because I am personally, leading a design agency, and we get a lot of UX UI portfolios, and people have done, a lot of, research work, like user interviews or, card sorting and, affinity mapping and all of those things. And young designers go ahead and show screenshots from the Excel sheet, or the actual screenshot, or a photo of the the creative process itself around card sorting, etc. So having non-consolidated raw data and snapshots sometimes becomes a little bit overwhelming and end up making things clutter. Instead, what you could do is, what was the outcome of that research, right? Showcase them in a graphical or a pictorial way. Let's say, for example, 7 out of 10 respondents in a survey said that they had a credit card, or 10 out of 20 people said that they like using credit card as opposed to debit card, or whatever it is, right? Whatever that work it is that you're doing, try to consolidate raw data into something that's more pictorial and more visual, so that the person on the receiving end, the person who's looking at it, can comprehend things a little bit better. Okay. Yeah. I was talking about how we end up sometimes using mockups that are too flattering. and that takes attention away from the real work itself. Let's not do that, right? Let's try to avoid that mistake. Let's keep the mockups very clean and to the point, and use wisely. Do not exaggerate them, do not use a lot of those things, because if you look at this left example, you are more focused on how these things are aligned, how these things are laid out, as opposed to the actual, the branding itself. However, when you look over here, you're more focused on the the artwork that's over here, placed in the bottle itself, because it is very clean and the mockup has been used very wisely. So do not exaggerate. Do not use mockups that take attention away from the real work. The other thing, is using poor low resolution images. Please, for the love of God, let's not have low resolution or poor images. I understand that sometimes certain platforms have size limitations, right? You can only upload 2.5 MB or whatever. In that case, you can use sites like TinyPNG, that does lossless compression for you, that maintains the quality, but at the same time gives you a low size file. So always use high resolution images so that the beauty of your work can come out very nicely, right? Nothing more troublesome like going through a well laid out portfolio, but at the same time not having very crystal clear high definition images. So always ensure that your images are not low resolution. The other thing is, and this is a cardinal sin, I would rather call it, and that's, I have also personally been a victim of this myself. When I was starting my career, I had this urge to tell that I know this, I know that, right? Because when we are venturing out, oftentimes we are practicing a lot of things. I'm doing a little bit of logo design, I'm doing a little bit of illustration, I'm doing UI, UX, etc. And I want to show everything, right? So it's not a wise idea, especially because almost all the time we are competent at one or two things more than other, right? So always showcase the work that you're competent at. You're good at UI design, showcase that more, right? Showcase that the most. Probably don't even show other things, but if you want to show that you have a variety of skill, use other categories of work also, but use them sparingly. Use them a little bit less than something else that you're more confident at and that you are more competent at. Yeah. Another thing is, another mistake is using very dated work. So we might, and this is more applicable for people who are already, in the design industry or as a designer for quite a long time. Resist the urge to put very old projects, right? It's good to give your portfolio a makeover every year or so. If there are any stale projects, 5 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, that you feel like it's not up to current standards, it's okay. Safely remove it from your website or from your portfolio platform, whatever that is, and have your more recent work, right? And that looks more fresh as to current standards. The other thing I was talking about sometime is non-professional emails, right? So do not have non-professional emails. Nothing more like seeing a very cheesy email after your work have done the talking. Finally, it should not come at a blah moment when a potential employer or a client is trying to contact you and they see a very not professional email. So ensure your work email is professional. At the same time, this can be also applied to your social media handles. Try to keep your social media handles consistent, right? Have the same username across different platforms that you have, and that goes a long way in showing that there is an attention to detail even in the minutest thing. Great. So now we'll be jumping into how potential employers or clients may be looking at your portfolio, right? So we've talked about the anatomy of portfolio so far, how it's important to have work about you and contact. We talked about how to showcase work, and what are some of the things that needs to be ensured when showcasing the work. And we also looked at what are some common mistakes that we as young designers may end up making. Now let's look at how employers or clients are going to actually look at your work. So we need to think through their lens of how they'll be consuming the portfolio, and therefore understanding that perspective becomes very, very important. Number one thing is employers or clients do not have a lot of time, right? Probably they, if it's a relatively smaller company, excuse me, if it's a relatively smaller company, they may invest a little bit more time, right? They may not have a lot of people that they are hiring. They may be hiring only a few people, so they may spend a little bit more time, probably 2 minutes, 3 minutes, going through an individual's portfolio. But usually people do not have a lot of time. So what you need to do is you need to make it scannable. There needs to be some consistency in terms of the way you tell story between your different works that you have in your portfolio, so that it becomes very easy to scan for them, right? They need to be able to consume the information quickly. Yeah, so keep the structure pretty consistent, and make it easy for them to quickly scan. Don't have a lot of text, and don't have just a lot of visuals. Do a right balance of things, make it very scannable. I'm going through it, it should be a breeze for me to quickly scan the quick keywords and just go through your portfolio. Easy to glance and know. Again, on similar lines, strive to keep the text short and crisp, right? Resist the urge to go ahead and include a bunch of paragraphs. You might have written a very good job of that. You might have done a very good job of writing those, but resist that urge. Why? Because if you evoke curiosity with short and crisp text, maybe in the interview you could elaborate more, you could talk more about that particular process or that particular work a little bit in depth in the interview. Leave some things for the interview, or leave some things for when you actually talk with that person, and keep things short and crisp. And again, focus on clarity and quality over quantity, and wherever possible add visual cues and make it very scannable. The other thing is visual breaks. So do not keep the case study too monotonous, too long, right? Don't keep it very long form and very elaborate. It's okay, you might have built 500 screens, you might have done a lot of work, you might have created 100 social media posts as part of a particular project. You could have done a very in-depth and elaborative branding of a lot of things involved. Resist the urge to show everything. It's okay to only showcase some of the aspects of it, and there needs to be again right balance of visuals and text. At the same time, break the content structure, right? Use font sizes appropriately, right? There needs to be visual hierarchy. If there is a heading text, make it big and bold. If there is some text you do not want a lot of attention and you want to show it more like a side indicator, make it a little bit small, so that there is a very good visual break and a very good hierarchy that's established. Because the number one thing to understand is these are busy professionals, these are busy hiring managers, or these are busy folks, clients who may be going to give you any freelance gigs, who are looking at your portfolio, right? Make it very, very scannable, and make your case study such that it can be consumed within a minute, right? From top to bottom, with a little bit of reading also involved. The other thing is make it worth remembering. Very, very subjective, very, very debatable. What is worth remembering, right? So, and it's very subjective, there's no right way to it, but you could do something to make your portfolio worth remembering, right? Maybe it's a little bit of animation that you have, or maybe it's a little bit of 3D that you've used, or maybe it's when someone is opening your work, there's some transition that happens in your website, or maybe it's an interesting choice of colors, or whatever it is, right? Inject a little bit of your personality, right? Because if there is something that stands out, it's rememberable, right? If there's something that sticks out from the norm, people remember that a little bit more, right? So what remembering is highly subjective, so take it with a pinch of salt, and caution is advised, because what may be worth remembering for you may not be worth remembering for somebody else. Maybe you wanted to use a very bright red and showcase some of your work, but maybe the other person at the other end may not end up liking very bright red. So there could be it could be highly subjective, but go ahead and experiment, see what you've done, show it to a couple of your friends or colleagues or professors if you're in your design school. And if you follow someone on the internet, don't hesitate to go ahead and reach out to them before you actually publish your portfolio. um, Give feedback from them, and improve on it, and apply your techniques to make it worth remembering. Cool. Great. So now we know what a good portfolio looks like. What are some of the things that we need to take care of? How do we actually go ahead and publish it? Where do we publish it? Right. We are coming towards the end of the topics that we are going to cover today, and publishing your portfolio is another aspect. So yeah, select a platform that works best for you. That's the long and short of it. So you could look at Behance, Dribble, some of these recommended platforms where most of the eyeballs are, and these are very easy and go-to platforms. Does not require any setup work. So the only thing to take care of over here is ensuring that you have nice cover images, or nice thumbnails that's enticing enough, right? It's also preferred to already mention what kind of work it is. So in Behance, you could create a cover like this, wherein on a corner or somewhere you can write what's the kind of work that you've done. Yeah. So also for these platforms, craft a good bio for yourself. Fill in the profile description or about section that these platforms have judiciously. And if people are commenting on your portfolio, on your work, go ahead and reply them. Take time. Someone has commented 1 month ago, don't reply them 1 month after. Try to be on time to respond. And if someone critiques your work also, then be polite in terms of responding back to them, right? Because when someone is scanning your portfolio and they see that you are being a little rude to someone who's giving you feedback or critic, it does not show that you are a sport, right? And another most important things, something that I've seen with a lot of young designers, a lot of portfolios that we receive as applications is not appropriately sizing the work. Every platform has its own publishing dimensions and guidelines, so make sure you size your designs accordingly. Nothing bad like a squeeze design or a stretch design, right? So don't do that. Already be mindful of this platform publishing dimensions. Look out for knowledge or help section that these platforms have, and understand what's the dimension and post accordingly. Instagram, another thing that's being very popular these days is Instagram. It may not be very professional. Let's keep that in mind. Depends on where are you applying. If you're applying at a very corporate position, then you might want to abstain from using Instagram and probably resort to something more conventional like Behance, Dribble. But at the same time, these days it's becoming more popular. People are using Instagram and people are accepting it, especially small to mid-sized companies, more like creative design agencies. They do not mind even getting an Instagram link as a portfolio. It may not work for all projects because the scope of elaborating your work on something like Behance or Dribble is much more as compared to Instagram, because you have a limited number of carousels, 10, and you have to do the job of conveying everything in 10 slides. So it's better suited for maybe projects like logo design, illustration, etc., wherein you could use the carousel to tell the story, right? Maybe you want to show how you come up with a sketch in the first slide, and in the second slide you want to show the rationale behind that sketch, and the third thing could be a colored version of that, and fourth thing could be showing it in a mock-up or visualization followed by a little bit of copy. So you could use Instagram also very creatively and have a nice and interesting cover for people to be interested to swipe next and see your work. Then the best of the best is having your own website. It really makes you stand out. Almost everyone will use Behance, Dribble, or Instagram. And another step of standing out is having your own website with your own name, right? That goes a long way in showing that you've done an effort to actually create a portfolio. And having your own website gives that professional touch far more better. There are a lot of ways you could do that. There's places like Wix, Squarespace, that are easy to use. They do not require a lot of technical knowledge, and they have a lot of pre-built templates. Webflow is another thing that's becoming very, very popular these days. Although it comes with a slight caveat that a little bit of technical knowledge is required, but it's a great platform to build on. It comes with a lot of animations and transitions also. Uh, then you could also, if you have some technical knowledge, or you have a buddy who knows a little bit about tech, you could also go ahead and use WordPress. Take up some free themes that are available on WordPress. Take up some templates that are already available and that look good. And if you have some money, maybe it's worthwhile to also spending a couple of bucks here and there on excuse me, paid themes, like Divi is a very good theme that exists out there. Salient is another very good theme that exists out there on top of WordPress. Very easy to use. With a little bit of learning curve, you'll be able to make very nice websites in a very short time. Simplest is another one. It's a little on the expensive side, but it's great. And yeah, get a help from a friend, or probably even a freelancer who knows about web development, if you are very interested in building your own website. But don't let making your website bother you so much that you do not end up using Behance or Dribble. Go ahead, use it, but if you have the time, if you have a little bit of knowledge, if you have a little bit of money, then maybe it's a good idea to spend a little bit of money on buying a domain, building your website. Couple of website tips is, again, ensure that you have an about section or about page. Ensure there is a clear work page, and there is a good homepage, right? Your homepage should be a gateway to either go into your work or other sections of the site, and at the same time bringing those important works to your homepage makes it very, very easy for potential employers to directly be able to see your work, right? Try to also use subtle page transitions if you can, right? A little bit of transitions, like parallax animation, or a little bit of fading out, fading in, or zooming out on images when you hover on it. Those kind of small little attention to details really shows that you're a very well-rounded person. Yeah. Most important thing, mobile responsiveness, right? I have seen some portfolios that have come to my way, very nice, looking websites on web, but when I'm on the go, and when I'm trying to look at them, it's not mobile responsive, and that's a bummer. In today's world, always ensure that if you have a website, ensure mobile responsiveness. And again, if people are contacting from your website, have a turnaround time, right? Try to keep it within 24 hours. Respond to them very quickly. That shows that you're very professional, you're timely, you're reachable, and it makes all the more interesting to be able to work with you. Because if you reply quickly, people will feel that later on when you work with them also, you're going to be very prompt and responsive. Yeah. Cool. We are at the end, so let's quickly recap on whatever we've discussed. So ensure that your work is clearly visible in your portfolio, because people come to look at your work, and then about you, and then finally contact you, right? Now that they have looked at your work and they've understood about you, they would go ahead and contact you. We'll touched upon how to showcase work in a portfolio. Understand the type of work depending on the level that you are at. Then go ahead and craft a storyline. Consider some of the aspects like headline, project brief, process, creatively showcasing your work. Resort to resources that's already available on the internet to speed up your time, and use those things aptly and wisely. Do not overuse mockups. We also talked about common design mistakes. Be mindful of those things, and keep a tab on whether or not you're doing those mistakes. And we talked about finally how employers are going to view your work, what's their perspective on things, and always value that they have very less time, right? Try to make your portfolio scannable within a minute tops. Yeah. Not everybody will have a lot of time to go through it, so make it very, very scannable and quickly readable. Then we also looked at how to publish things. So definite choice, top two players, Behance and Dribble. when you are using Behance and Dribble, try to use the thumbnails very nicely. Also showcasing the kind of work in the thumbnail itself is very important, because I as an employer may not want to open any project, because that's not something that I may be looking at. So it already saves my time. The other thing to do probably is experiment on Instagram also. Maybe even if Instagram is not your primary portfolio, maybe you could show some of your work in your professional Instagram account. You could have a personal Instagram account and have a professional Instagram account also, wherein you put tidbits of your work. And the third and the king of all is having your own website. It's a little bit costly, because you'll have to spend a little bit of money on getting a domain, getting a server, and hosting your website. And probably even if you are not good at development, if you don't know development, taking help of a freelancer and getting your website developed, all of this may cost a little bit of money, but it goes a long way, right? It is totally worth the investment to have your own website. Then now, what are some closing thoughts? Focus on completion over perfection, right? Do not worry about making it perfect to the T. Keep this high level principles in mind, and go ahead and build it, do it. Do not worry about making it perfect. Make a version 1 of it, show it to someone, get their feedback, right? Show it to someone who's already working on that industry. Maybe you have a relative, maybe you have a colleague who've already graduated from your college, a senior who've already graduated from your college. Maybe you want to maybe there is someone whom you follow on social media who you admire of your work. Don't hesitate to reach out to them. Yeah, keep it fresh, update once or twice a year. Nothing like looking at a very old work. So keep it fresh, update it once or twice a year, and go ahead, reach out to potential companies, right? But be mindful of not spamming them. Yeah, write a short interesting conversation starter of who are you and why you are looking to work at so and so company, and how you feel you could add value, and put a link to your portfolio. So you will not see success right away, because again, you have to understand that these folks may be busy and may not have the right time to look at all the messages that you might have sent on LinkedIn or Instagram or any other social handle. But don't be worried about failing, right? If you reach out to 100, maybe 2 will respond, right? But if they respond, it could be a very good thing for you. So don't worry about that they may respond, they may not respond. Oh, they didn't respond, probably I'll not do it. Reach out to them, but don't spam, right? Try once or twice, and if they do not respond in a long while also, then don't bother them too much also. Yeah, so without being spammy, you could always reach out to potential companies or potential clients. Thanks everyone who joined today. It's the first workshop that we've done here at ProApp, and we're already seeing good responses from people, and that makes us happy to continue doing more workshops like this. Before I leave, I want to talk about something that I'm planning to do a workshop on next, which is my personal favorite, is the art of client servicing. Because whether you are a freelancer, or whether you are working at a design agency, or whether you are working at a product company also, you'll always have some clients, right, or stakeholders that you will have to service. So a lot of designers they say client servicing is something that's difficult for a lot of designers, because they're very good at what they do, which is design, but the ancillary aspect of design, which is servicing the clients or stakeholders, is also equally important. And I have serviced and worked with a lot of clients, from startups to, like I said, to enterprises alike. And there are a lot of different people, and dealing with a lot of people with a common framework is going to help you service them better. So watch out our social media for when this workshop will happen next. I'll be talking about how can you start project on the right note with the client. I'll be talking about what is a client designer relationship like, what are the things that you need to be aware about this relationship that you're going to get on a client with for a couple of months for the project. how to become a better conversationalist, right? How to spark conversations, what kind of talk you need to have with the client. I'll also talk about, how to approach problems and disagreements, because when you work with a client, and especially in a design industry, things will be very subjective. What I like, you may not like. So how to, approach those disagreements and how to confront properly. And at the same time, working with a client, there may be some ups and downs. So how at times you can always reflect back and course correct and move forward. So yeah, I'll be talking about this, and I think it's going to be equally interesting. I'm very much excited. I'm not sure about how many of you will be excited to attend this, but yeah, do watch out. If if this thing interests you, I think you'll be able to take some learnings from this as well.